God gives us military men special lives. Women who are strong and women who rise up to the occasion. I remember there was a time I was speaking to a lady at a wedding, and she asked me a question that jolted me. I was the chairman at the wedding. It must have been about 2006 or so. No, something like that, 2004, 2005. After this, my traumatic experience. And she said, why is it that you military men are so always afraid of your wives? And I said, why do you say that? And she said, yeah, you all seem to be afraid of your wife. You shake after them and so on. And I said, well, you need to understand what these women go through. They run the home. We're constantly on the move. Even if you're in the same town, you got called out at odd hours, you come home late. And so you find that, taking care of the children, running the home, going to the schools for the children and all that is done by the wives. And if you have a good wife, all you have to do is look for the money and she'll take care of everything else. And when you have that, it allows you to focus on your job. Take, for instance, my son with cerebral palsy. For 12 years, my wife handled him virtually alone. This was a period when GSM wasn't working very well. So it wasn't as if you called. I still went on 1 or 2 courses where I was even out of the country. During the election, I remember the period in 2003. There were periods when I couldn't come home for 6 months. That time, every small thing, there'll be cancellation of leave passes, there'll be no movement for military, and so on. And I was in Kaduna, I was in Makurdi, I was everywhere, and they were in Lagos. So, the wife, or my wife, has played a very important role in my life. She has contributed immensely to my getting to where I got. In fact, there are lots of officers that I got to know later on who have children with special needs, whose careers didn't go as well as mine. And so that's why some people wonder, how do you keep smiling? How do you... In fact, some people, when they find out, maybe a couple of years or after, they said, but we never knew, we never saw this sign. It is because I had somebody at home who took care of things, There are lots of challenges, but when you can surmount them, they're not really challenges per se. There are times when you are sent on a course. I did attend a lot of courses, but I'll tell you, some of the courses were not because people really liked me. They were like last minute openings. For instance, in it was in 1978. I went to Germany for a 2-year program, a staff college like what is done in Jaji, but in a German defense college. And it required me to learn German for 1 year before doing the program. And you see, there are some individuals who have connections. It works everywhere. And when those kind of programs come up, you find they've used their connections to get those courses. But here was it was the first time the Air Force was offered that option. And it turned out nobody wanted to go because everybody was scared about learning a new language. And that's how come I was given that option at the last minute. In fact, because of the delay in getting me nominated for the program, I had to arrive in Germany 1 month late. So again, for a 1-year language course, I arrived with only 11 months to go. But somehow I found myself handling the stuff, and I was able to come out with very good, with higher than required grades in the German language, and I successfully completed the program. So those are some of the challenges that one would talk about having all through. When people talk about born again, I ask that question. Yes, they say, okay, you've had immersion, you've had this, you've had that, but I think there's a lot more that happens beyond that, and it's the real spiritual experience. I'm happy for people who say that they just woke up one day, something happened, and then their life changed completely. For me, it's been doses. Okay, I went through the whole gamut. I went to Catholic school. My secondary school was Catholic. I went to Mass every day for 5 years. And then my father was so and stuff like that. But my first accident as a young man jolted me to the reality of life. I mean, why did I survive? Then I had my second accident. That was even more traumatic. And I remember somebody came to the hospital. That was a season where a lot of people in Lagos and all, there were a lot of armed robbery attacks, people were being shot. Most people will get to the hospital will not accept them without a police report. And so most people died not from the gunshot wound immediate effect, but the lack of response from medical care or appropriate medical care in time. So most people bled to death, and I still survived. So this gentleman came in to see me in the hospital and said, there must be a reason why God kept you alive, and my son's birth, living with him, the promotion that I missed at the time I did, and so many of these things just kept reaffirming your faith in God. And my own walk is a slow walk that has evolved and is getting stronger even now. Like I said, I've seen church from different levels. My mother was Catholic by birth, and she died a Catholic. My father was Anglican, but he was a police officer. So his schedule was so tight that he didn't go to church as often as he should. So we ended up going to church with my mom. I went to a Catholic school. But one thing about my dad is that whenever he could, particularly on those special days like Christmas, Easter, and all that, we would all go, and my mom would go along with him. And when he retired into full church life in Ilori, where he finally died. So really for me, my experience has been such that I've been involved in church building committees, in welfare committees, in one or two things in different parts of this country. And then I think the most important one actually is that as a military commander at various levels, you also have church people. You have it could be the Catholic priest, the Anglican, the Protestant minister, the imam, who are under your command. Even they could be military personnel or civilians that are working within the unit to help you run the place. And so you find yourself having to judge over certain crisis that happens in these places of worship. And in the process of doing that, you are exposed. I mean, I had a period in Makurdi where the Catholic Bishop of Makurdi had to come and see me over a crisis in the Catholic Church on the base. And you get to learn some things that, I'll tell you, can be very disturbing. There are rules, there are regulations, there are rituals, and usually it has to do with management of funds. So I'll tell you, my own problem with the real church people is that they love to spend money without accounting for it. They love to make it look like, I mean, when you come from a system where people talk about proper accountability, proper this. Those things disturb me. And so as much as possible these days, I try not to accept any appointment in the church. I do my own bit. But on a one-on-one thing, I try to also, I do a bit of evangelism. And I know that there are certain people who appreciate my views about life and about religion and about God. And I try to let people understand that God is in us. The book, Bible, is written in clear language that anybody who is educated can understand. And we should fellowship. We should go to church. But we should not see the man in front of us as a replica of God. He's just a conduit through the message being delivered. And what we find in a lot of instances is where the man is trying to edify himself and where he's trying to present himself as the sole authority on the word or as the sole representative of God. And that's where I have a problem. Again, one of the things I didn't mention about going to school is when you go to public schools, like we did in those days, everybody came to school. There were lots of kids with polio. They had all these metal braces. Some of them could walk with crutches, some even walk without crutches. But they hobbled around in the metal braces. You had those of them who were either vision impaired or some other kind of physical disability, but they came to school. And you quickly developed relationships with them, because even if you didn't like them, even if you made fun of them, by the time the test or exam results came out and you realize that they're hot upstairs, it turns to respect. You know, and to be honest with you, when you live in that kind of environment, which is what we're calling inclusive society now, you get to know very quickly that the real man is not what you're looking at physically. It's beyond that physical thing. And to know that physical person, I mean that inner person, you have to come close to them. And once you know that the person is invariably nice, has a good heart, you are drawn to them and you stop seeing their disability. So I had a lot of those experiences as a young man. And then growing up, one also had instances, especially in my, some of my foreign trips and trainings abroad, that you saw people with disabilities who were living the life, who were excelling in spite of their disability. Then comes my couple of accidents where I was also limited, okay, and where I also had to leave with help and whatever, and where I also had to spend a lot of time in therapy. And so I think God used all those things to prepare me for my son. And when he was born, yes, the name cerebral palsy was like, what is this? I mean, I'd never heard it before. And it took a lot of effort to read up and so on to begin to understand what it is. Eventually, we did what we could. We got some support from the Air Force. We took him abroad to Germany at first. And then every time I went abroad to the UK, to India, just like my father did with my mom. In fact, if the news comes I'm going on course, sometimes before I even get home, my wife has started planning how to pack. So, we got all those options, and he's a very healthy, fine young man. And once you get to understand that it's a condition and it's not an illness, or it's not a sickness, it makes life a lot easier. And when you also get to understand that, yes, he may fall sick from time to time because of the limitations and what is called comorbidities because of that condition. All you are doing is managing those comorbidities, but it's not as if you're treating him. He's not a patient, and it just makes life. Life has been. Well, I say it's not been easy for us because the cost implications of managing him are enormous. Okay, even in terms of physical time spent at home with him and everything with his brothers, it takes a lot on us. But somehow we've lived well. I have never questioned God, because my first understanding of God is that He is He's all-seeing, all-knowing, all-loving. Everything He does is for good. It's just that sometimes it's with hindsight that we realize that what happened to us was meant for good for us. And so yes, you call on Him for help, and you do see help. When you have a child like this, there are times when you run out of resources, you run out of medication, you run out of whatever, even patience. And then somebody walks in, or somebody calls you, or something happens. That can only be God. So having a child like that, I think, affords you the opportunity to see God at play in your life almost on a daily basis. Clear. I'm not talking about I lost my key and then I prayed and I found it. Praise God. No. I'm talking about earth-shaking experiences that, after a while, you don't even make noise about it. It's only when somebody asks and you tell them that they look at you and say, "You mean you're going through that?" That's when you realize, oh, is it really special? You understand? But to be honest with you, having a child like that is a blessing. Well, I'll say because of my background, and luckily my wife's also acceptance of his condition. Unlike most families in the past, we saw it as an opportunity to educate people. And so we always talk about him, we always talk about the condition, and we've made a lot of new friends, even at the very beginning, because of him. Then my wife has taken extremely good care of him. Because when you see some children, especially when he was young, in that condition, they are not very, even feeding is a bit of a problem. Some of them don't chew, they don't swallow easily. So you need a lot of patience to feed them. And she has kept him very healthy, very neat, very attractive. And so many people who see him warm up to him. And so I would say, it's not been a problem at all. It has opened doors. And so when I retired, one of the things that came to my mind, okay, so I'll tell you something. When you have a child like that, they actually deteriorate physically because, muscles get tight. There's something called scoliosis, when the spinal cord starts twisting and all that, and they change physically, but the person who is with them every day does not quite notice. So it is someone like me who comes like once a month or so who begins to notice that, what's wrong with him? And they say, there's nothing. You say, no, he wasn't like this last time I came. And so I got to realize that I had a role, and 12 years away from his life had put so much stress on my wife that she needed a break. I also needed to get involved somehow in managing him. And so I decided that 35 years, straight from secondary school, working for a system that had absolute control over my life, I didn't want to do that again. I didn't want to go into employed job. And having been a teacher, I saw the possibility of working maybe with an institution that was into capacity building, or maybe some consultancy outfit, doing what I know best, which is passing on knowledge. And so we tried various options, but there were friends in church who kept talking about NGO. And eventually I had to explain to somebody that, look, You see, when you come from civil liberties organization and all those Abacha movement periods, the impression is that an NGO is an outfit that fights government. And I made it clear to everybody that, look, I couldn't have worked for 35 years in a system and then come out and be fighting the system. Yes, there are problems. I see deficiencies. But for me, it's about pointing out, first of all, the deficiencies or the problems, and also profiling a workable solution. Because I think it is by persuasion that you bring about the best change. Violence destroys a lot of things. At the end of the day, lives are even lost. And so I tried to fight this for almost 4 years of my retirement, until eventually some doctor convinced me that, look, there is a way you can do this thing. The other thing is also, you know, when you have a child like that, you are drawn to homes and special schools. My wife, as a rule, was going to homes, making donations, like, you know, clothes and things, toys that my son couldn't use again. She would take them. So she knew a lot of those places. And what strikes you is that there's a lot of demand. There's a lot of physical and financial and otherwise in running a home. And if you do that, you'd end up in a situation where you wouldn't have time to do what I consider to be the most important thing. The most important thing for change is to make people aware, to demystify something that people have stigmatized, and to let people know the numbers of those who are involved. When you do that, then you begin to draw attention. And hopefully government, private sector, the people who can actually bring in the resources and all to make this change will come in. And so to me, I feel, I know the people running homes and schools are doing a fantastic job. But you see, if your focus is all about help me take care of these children, then the change really will not happen. So when this gentleman came and said, you know, you could do an advocacy thing, you could raise awareness. Even just letting people know the way you've taken care of your child will help a lot of people. And then hopefully people at your level who are not speaking will come out. Because as of that time, the impression, and I think in some cases the impression is still that conditions like cerebral palsy and so on only happen to children of the poor. And so we decided, we took it on, and that's how we came up with Benola as an initiative. So when people ask why you are an initiative, why not a foundation, I said, look, I may not be a professor, but because I've been teaching all my life, I've always looked at things academically. You go into the dictionaries, you look for the meaning of those words, and you find that a foundation is actually an organization that is funded by somebody who has money and just wants to do some goodwill. So if you call yourself a foundation and you're begging for money, I think there's something wrong. Or you don't have money to run whatever you're doing. And so I looked at it. To me, the best way I could look at was an initiative, it's an idea. And I told people in February 2013, when we launched Benola, that Benola is an idea. And it's an idea that is running wild. Where it's going to end, I don't know. But I know that there is so much to be done by everybody. And my job with my wife, with this initiative, is to act as the catalyst to get people thinking, to get people off their feet, and to get ideas rolling. And so we've pushed Benola in that direction. And to the glory of God, a lot has been done. I think now when you go online, when you Google cerebral palsy, the first thing you find is Benola. There's a lot of work we've done. We have a lot of people who are eminent people, medical, special education, and even government people who have now seen the benefits of what we're trying to do. And They're supplying us with ideas. They're joining us to do workshops and brainstorm. And a lot has been done, but there is still so much. There's still so much to be done.